And as we say, there's no huge, obvious turning point. There's no inciting incident that kind of does that. She just sort of lets a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses in one day.
Kind of a series of incidents, I suppose.
Yeah. And just kind of gets won over to it, I suppose, with a few people talking to her. And becomes really like the most insufferable kind of
type
born-again Christian who's just going round to everyone and going like,
being judgmental.
I've met someone. Oh, tell me all about him. His name's Jesus Christ, and I want you to meet him as well. It's that level of like, oh God, will you just... Yeah. And then her boss calls her in and lets her keep her job. But he does tell her to pack it in and do a job properly.
I thought that was one of the more interesting scenes. I actually thought the twist at the end was that everyone was going to be part of the cult and she was just really late to the party with it all.
Can I bring up kind of a new topic?
Yeah, go ahead.
But it's something the film raised. I'd be interested to see what a Gnostic approach of this is. But it's a question of morality, I suppose, and what is morality? Because obviously in this we're presented with someone who's like debauched, doing drugs and having sex with random people, and that is kind of the bad thing, and the Christian side is the good thing.
Yeah.
But also we get a little bit with David Duchovny where he goes like, "Oh yeah, I killed somebody for money once."
Yeah.
And he specifically says, "I wonder if we were never told that murder was bad, would I still feel bad about it?"
I think it's subjective, but I remember feeling guilt about certain things I had done before learning they were bad.
Question: like, is there any sense of universal morality? Personally, I think there isn't, but
I think there's I think there is. I mean, it depends what you mean by morality. Again, it's such a wishy-washy phrase, but insofar as I think morality stems from empathy, really, true morality, it's certainly the way I see it. And I think empathy exists without. I think empathy is innate, unless you're a psychopath and born without it. I think we have empathy for other beings, and I think so long as you can say this person is suffering, I know what it's like to suffer. I don't want them to experience what I experience. I think that
there is something in us that wants us to create these structures or rules for morality, be it under the guise of religion or say God. But even if that's just our unconscious, like in the Bible, you have the story of Cain and Abel that lays out why murder is wrong and why it's evil. So it is a really interesting question.
I really like Saul's description there. I think there is an innate empathy that as a species we have evolved or whatever in order to live with each other. And I think you need it, and however your society structures that in terms of laws or accepted morals is ever changing. But
that's it. It's obviously,
I think it goes
tied
the same
up in so much societal red tape that things like smoking get tied up in that for whatever tangential reason, and that's why I think that sort of stuff, whether or not it's immoral to drink alcohol, for example, is obviously entirely learnt behaviour. But I think it all largely stems from that empathy.
But I think we're hardwired to live together. I mean, we are in the midst of a global pandemic at the moment, and I'm ready to start looting. I don't know about you guys. I'm ready to start setting fire to things. But I don't know how far away we are from that as a society. But I think in terms of that kind of universal morality I was talking about, I think it's so easy to make people step away from our ingrained morals in the right circumstances.
Especially when it involves God.
But no, like, to use a very extreme example, like, the guards at Auschwitz or whatever were not innately evil people. They were just put into a certain situation with the right pressures, the right motivations to just do that. There may be some innately evil, as in not empathetic, psychopathic people kind of making those decisions, or perhaps there is some greater sense of evil there. But I think a normal person can be derailed really easily.
Yeah, it's the banality of evil. That's what they call it, don't they? I mean, I think, but that scene with her is good because David Duchovny's character is the only one who really, challenges her beliefs.
There's a lot of little lines here and there that are just very like, well, if there's a God, then how come X, Y, Z?
Yeah.
Like even her daughter asks her a few of those sorts of questions near the end. Like, hang on, why have we got to do this? If God's
there's no attempt to
powerful,
answer the questions, even from a theological point of view. Like even to give a bullshit religious answer, they don't really bother even doing that. Which is why I think
I read on this film, having watched it twice now, is that it's quite a scathingly anti-religious film from a man who is, if not an atheist, definitely anti-religion. If not anti-God. They definitely seem to be against the dogma that goes with it.
Unless it's a Gnostic film, and it could be making the argument that this God we should all love and worship is actually the demiurge.
Yeah, I would definitely go along with the Gnostic argument there, because the ending for me is her not just believing in God, but seeing God, sort of literal evidence of God in her eyes, and going, "No, I don't like this God. This God made me kill my child. Fuck this God."
Which is very Gnostic.
Isn't that's Satanism as well? God's real, then he's a piece of shit, and I don't want anything to do with it. I
think Satanism is just taking atheist principles and being a bit theatrical with it all, really.
I think Satanism, as it tends to actually exist in an organized world now, it's really just the it's atheism in its like trolliest form.
Yeah, it's like me setting up a movement that hates Star Wars, but we all have to worship Darth Vader.
Yeah. But the difference is, I think actual Satanists who, belong to the Church of Satan are atheists who are just, that's their little collective form of community. So if anyone listening to this hasn't seen the film, at this point, Mimi Rodgers has become a mega born again.
There's a
Christian,
6 years later sudden jump.
Yeah, she kind of confronts David Duchovny, her
that was a stupid scene as well,
of sorts, and she somehow convinces him to accept God into his life with her.
And David Duchovny's character has been the voice of reason. Like everything he was saying was like, that's what I would say.
But then they do a time skip. So in the 6 years, did you say, Alan? 6 years later.
But again, again, there's no realistic sense of conversion or anything. She just sort of says no.
Well, they skip right past it. He doesn't accept it at first. He just kind of goes, yeah, right, I'll kind of humour you if it means we can have sex. Yeah, she's obviously worked him long enough, and he seems to be fully on board. But he's still, he's a high power position at this company, and he's firing people, and he's made an enemy. Now, this is another scene where, to talk about me not knowing how to take this film on my first viewing, again, the idea that this evil man would go on a mass shooting because he's fired, and it's the character of the man being fired. Obviously, it's a very small role, but he's so two-dimensional.
I don't know. I bought his performance, but yeah, maybe there was more of a backstory to that scene, because the film does feel like a film that has had a lot of it, has had a lot cut out from it, like a lot of deleted scenes, maybe on, I don't know, but for whatever reason, I think it's a good film. I'm glad you suggested it, because I don't think I would have discovered it otherwise, because it's not as well known as the other films and TV in the, I guess, the apocalyptic genre, with, films like Frailty, Left Behind, and the Leftover series that I'm planning on doing. Just looking on Wikipedia here, it says that Mimi Rodgers is actually a Scientologist.
Well, yeah, she's the one who introduced Tom Cruise to it.
Which is interesting, because Scientology is heavily linked to Gnosticism, because Ron L. Hubbard was into the occult, and he would hang around with Jack Parsons, who was involved with Thelema and Aleister Crowley. And if you look at the mythology of Gnosticism, it's very similar to Scientology. With Lord Xenu trapping alien souls into human bodies, it is quite synonymous with, the demiurge trapping the divine spark into this universe. So I'm convinced he's just taken that mythology and just put his own sci-fi spin on it to create a religion, because, Gnostic ideas resonate with people in, powerful ways.
She was raised in Scientology, as in her father was a Scientologist way back in the early days. And I did see a quote. She said something like that, like although kind of her own religious beliefs didn't play into the part, she said the fact that I'm not Christian or Jewish and kind of in this, raised within this structure meant I didn't have the same reverence for it. So perhaps it was easier for me to play in it as an actor rather than as someone who's actually experienced it in the same way. That's the inference I took from the quote. It's not really what she said. But yeah, she didn't write it, she's just acting in it. So that doesn't necessarily make any difference. But I think if you hire a Christian actor for that role, they're going to question it in a different way, even if they then go, I don't care enough, I'll play whatever you want. If you hire an atheist actor in that role, they're going to approach it in a different way. So I think having someone who has a sort of religious structure, but is not really specifically tied to the one they're really looking at here, is probably a good way of doing it.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting at is that she didn't seem to have any self-awareness with her culty vibes, regardless of its foundations in Christianity, because she doesn't go to a typical church. She goes to one which has the boy prophet, and he's just like a big part of that, but they don't really expand on his role.
Prophet.
I mean, the important thing, I suppose, that we've not mentioned yet is that this cult that she joins, this sect of Christianity, because they're very much a fringe group born out of Christianity rather than a complete from the ground up kind of cult. They believe that the end times are upon us and rapture is impending. And the rapture is, of course, an idea in Christianity, but it's kind of up for debate as to whether or not the religious scripture, the Bible, talks about rapture, or if it's an entirely modern invention born out of interpreting the book incorrectly. The rapture is actually quite a uniquely American thing. It seems like American Christianity is very into the idea that, what is the rapture? It's essentially the notion that Jesus is going to have a second coming. He's going to come to earth, and so is the Antichrist. And there's going to be a point where it all kicks off, the rapture, where everyone who is worthy of heaven will be called up to heaven, which basically means that their bodies will vanish. They'll be instantly ascended, and that's generally depicted as a load of clothes being left just where people were when it's shown in TV and films. And the idea is that I think it's something like there will be a 7-year period while the armies of hell are kind of gathered, and Jesus will assemble a kind of army of his own, and then they're going to have a big war to kind of duke it out, heaven v hell, for the right to earth, and everyone on earth can still, I think they can still turn it around and get accepted into heaven if they lead a good life and become worthy over those 7 years, but I'm not entirely sure about those details. To be honest, I think the details are largely made up by preachers and fringe cult groups like this.
I mean, apocalypse doesn't necessarily mean end of the world. It means great revealing. So who knows? Maybe aliens show up and they say, by the way, we've been your gods and we told you this was all going to happen. But yeah, what's interesting about the ending of this film is that it does what Kevin Smith was planning on doing for the ending of his film Red State.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, yeah. So there's a 6-year time jump. Then David Duchovny gets murdered in a mass shooting at his workplace, which leaves Mimi Rodgers as a grieving single parent of a child. So again, she's lived seems like a pretty comfortable, happy 6 years, but now she's back to that, empty void situation we last saw her in. because of the death of her husband and the father of a child, and it all kind of kicks off again, and she starts to have